So it's taken me this long to get round to making my soap, and I'm still not even sure I'm going to make it today, but I've got the ingredients out. Under here, this is borax, which I use after I've made the soap as a preservative, and also to increase the amount of soap paste that you can dissolve in the water. So in here, I've got 50 grams of castor oil, 300 grams of coconut oil, and 650 grams of sunflower oil. And the only other ingredient I need to make the soap is deionized water. One moment. So this is what the finished product looks like. It's very light coloured because of the sunflower oil. If I used olive oil in it as well, it would be a bit darker. Chapter 1. Oh, this is book 2 of Dark Night. Chapter 1. The beginning of the treatise on the dark night of the spirit explains when this night commences. 1. If His Majesty intends to lead the soul on, he does not put it in this dark night of the spirit immediately after its going out from the aridities and trials of the first purgation and night of sense. Instead, after having emerged from the state of beginners, the soul usually spends many years exercising itself in the state of proficience. In this new state, as one liberated from a cramped prison cell, it goes about the things of God with much more freedom and satisfaction of spirit, and with more abundant interior delight, than it did in the beginning, before entering the night of sense. Its imagination and faculties are no longer bound to discursive meditation and spiritual solicitude, as was their custom. The soul readily finds in its spirit, without the work of meditation, a very serene, loving contemplation and spiritual delight. Nonetheless, the purgation of the soul is not complete. The purgation of the principal part, that of the spirit, is lacking, and without it the sensory purgation, however strong it may have been, is incomplete, because of a communication existing between the two parts of the soul that form only one suppositum. As a result, certain needs, aridities, darknesses and conflicts are felt. These are sometimes far more intense than those in the past, and are like omens or messengers of the coming night of the spirit. There's a footnote here. The interchange between sense and spirit highlights the intrinsic unity of the human person. This contemplation, sometimes dry and dark, sometimes serene and loving, invites comparison with the absence and presence of the beloved in the drama of the spiritual canticle. The active night of the spirit, explained at length in the Ascent, also deals with the state of proficience. But they are not lasting, as they will be in the night that is to come. For after enduring the short period or periods of time, or even days in this night and tempest, the soul immediately returns to its customary serenity. Thus God purges some individuals who are not destined to ascend to a lofty degree, so lofty a degree of love as are others. He brings them into this night of contemplation and spiritual purgation at intervals, frequently causing the night to come and then the dawn, so that David's affirmation might be fulfilled. He sends his crystal, brackets contemplation, like morsels. Psalm 147:17. These morsels of dark contemplation, though, are never as intense as is that frightful night of contemplation we are about to describe, in which God places the soul purposely, in order to bring it to divine union. 2. The delight and interior gratification of these proficients enjoy abundantly and readily is communicated more copiously to them than previously, and consequently overflows into the senses. More than was usual before the sensory purgation. Since the sensory part of the soul is now purer, it can, after its own mode, experience the delights of the spirit more easily. But since, after all, the sensory part of the soul is weak and incapable of vigorous spiritual communications, these proficients, because of such communications experienced in the sensitive part, suffer many infirmities, injuries, and weaknesses of stomach, and as a result fatigue of spirit. The wise man says, the corruptible body is a load upon the soul. Wisdom 9:15. Consequently, the communications imparted to proficients cannot be very strong or very intense or very spiritual, as is required for divine union, because of the weakness and corruption of the senses that have their share in them. Thus we have raptures and transports and the dislocation of bones, which always occur when the communications are not purely spiritual, communicated to the spirit alone, as are those of the perfect, who are already purified by the night of spirit. The perfect enjoy freedom of spirit without their senses being clouded or transported, for in them these raptures and bodily torments cease. Footnote 2. No, hang on. There he refers to Saint Teresa's treatment of these matters. See her life, chapter 20, Interior Castle 6, chapters 4-6. 3. To point out why these proficients must enter this night of the spirit, we will note some of their imperfections and some of the dangers they confront. There's another footnote here, 3. As in Book 1, to explain the need for the purification, John pauses first to speak of imperfections, in this case of the proficients. Chapter 2. Other imperfections of these proficients. 1. The imperfections in these proficients are of two kinds, habitual and actual. The habitual are the imperfect affections and habits still remaining like roots in the spirit, for the sensory purgation could not reach the spirit. The difference between the two purgations is like the difference between pulling up roots or cutting off a branch, rubbing out a fresh stem, or an old, deeply embedded one. As we said, the purgation of the senses is only the gate to and the beginning of the contemplation that leads to the purgation of spirit. This sensitive purgation, as we also explained, serves more for the accommodation of the senses to the spirit than for the union of the spirit with God. The stains of the old self still linger in the spirit, although they may not be apparent or perceptible. If these are not wiped away by the use of soap and strong lye of this purgative night, the spirit will be unable to reach the purity of divine union. 2. These proficients also have the hebitudo mentis, the natural dullness everyone contracts through sin, and a distracted and inattentive spirit. There's a footnote here, and it says, an important factor in John's anthropology is that sin lies at the root of all the defects mentioned both here and in the first book. The spirit must be illumined, clarified, and recollected by means of the hardships and conflicts of this night. All those who have not passed beyond the state of proficience possess these habitual imperfections that cannot, as we said, coexist with the perfect state of the union of love. 3. Not all these proficients fall into actual imperfections in the same way. Some encounter greater difficulties and dangers than those we mentioned, for their experience of these goods, in the sense, is so exterior and easily come by. They receive an abundance of spiritual communications and apprehensions in the sensory and spiritual part of their souls, and frequently behold imaginative and spiritual visions. All of this, as well as other delightful feelings, are the lot of those who are in this state, and the soul is often tricked through them by its own fantasy as well as by the devil. The devil finds it pleasing to suggest to souls and impress on them apprehensions and feelings. As a result of all this, These proficients are easily charmed and beguiled if they are not careful to renounce such apprehensions and feelings and energetically defend themselves through faith. This is the stage in which the devil induces many into believing vain visions and false prophecies. He strives to make them presume that God and the saints speak with them, and frequently they believe their fantasy. It is here that the devil customarily fills them with presumption and pride. Drawn by vanity and arrogance, they allow themselves to be seen in exterior acts of apparent holiness, such as raptures and other exhibitions. They become audacious with God and lose holy fear, which is the key to and guardian of all the virtues. Illusions and deceptions so multiply in some, and become so inveterate in them, that it is very doubtful whether they will return to the pure road of virtue and authentic spirituality. They fall into these miseries by being too secure in their surrender to these apprehensions and spiritual feelings, and do this just when they are beginning to make progress along the way. There's another footnote that says John deals with these matters more at length and from the active perspective of the journey in faith, in ascent. 4. So much could be said about the imperfections of these proficients and of how irremediable. That's not the right word, hang on. Irremediable. And of how irremediable they are, since proficients think their blessings are more spiritual than formerly, that I desire to pass over the matter. I only assert, in order to establish the necessity of the spiritual night, the purgation, for anyone who is to advance, that no proficients, however strenuous their efforts, will avoid many of these natural affections and imperfect habits. These must be purified before one may pass on to divine union. 5. Furthermore, to repeat what was said above, these spiritual communications cannot be so intense, so pure and so vigorous as is requisite for this union, because the lower part of the soul still shares in them. Thus, to reach union, the soul must enter the second night of the spirit. In this night, both the sensory and spiritual parts are despoiled of all these apprehensions and delights, and the soul is made to walk in dark and pure faith, which is the proper and adequate means to divine union, as God says through Hosea, I will espouse you, brackets, unite you, end brackets, to me through faith. Hosea 2:20. Chapter 3. An explanation for what is to follow. 1. These souls, then, are now proficients. Their senses have been fed with sweet communications, so that, allured by the gratification flowing from the spirit, they could be accommodated and united to the spirit. Each part of the soul can now in its own way receive nourishment from the same spiritual food, and from the same dish of only one suppositum and subject. These two parts, thus united and conformed, are jointly prepared to suffer the rough and arduous purgation of the spirit that awaits them. In this purgation, these two portions of the soul will undergo complete purification, for one part is never adequately purged without the other. The real purgation of the senses begins with the spirit. Hence the night of the senses, we explained, should be called a certain reformation and bridling of the appetite, rather than a purgation. The reason is that all the imperfections and disorders of the sensory part are rooted in the spirit, and from it receive their strength. All good and evil habits reside in the spirit, and until these habits are purged, the senses cannot be completely purified of their rebellions and vices. 2. In this night that follows, both parts are jointly purified. This was the purpose of the reformation of the first night, and the calm that resulted from it, that the sensory part, united in a certain way with the spirit, might undergo purgation and suffering with great fortitude. Such is the fortitude necessary for so strong and arduous a purgation, that if the lower part in its weakness is not reformed first, and afterwards strengthened in God through the experience of sweet and delightful communion with him, he has neither the fortitude nor the preparedness to endure it. 3. These proficients are still very lowly and natural in their communication with God, and in their activity directed toward him because the gold of the Spirit is not purified and illumined. They still think of God and speak of him as little children, and their knowledge and experience of him is like that of little children, as St. Paul asserts, 1 Corinthians 13:11. The reason is they have not reached perfection, which is union of the soul with God. Through this union, as fully grown, they do mighty works in their spirit, since their faculties and works are more divine than human, as we will point out. Wishing to strip them, in fact, of this old self and clothe them with the new, which is created according to God in the newness of sense, as the Apostle says, Colossians 3:9-10, Ephesians 4:22-24, Romans 12:2. God divests the faculties, affections, and senses, both spiritual and sensory, interior and exterior. He leaves the intellect in darkness, the will in aridity, the memory in emptiness, and the affections in supreme affliction, bitterness, and anguish, by depriving the soul of the feeling and satisfaction it previously obtained from spiritual blessings. For this privation is one of the conditions required that the spirit form, For this privation is one of the conditions required that the spiritual form, which is the union of love, may be introduced into the spirit and united with it. The Lord works all of this in the soul by means of pure and dark contemplation, as is indicated in the first stanza. Although we explain this stanza in reference to the first night of the senses, the soul understands it mainly in relation to the second night of the spirit. Since this night is the principal purification of the soul, with this in mind we will quote it and explain it again. There's a footnote here that says John explains this first stanza 3 times, each time from a different perspective. The stanza refers mainly to the night of the spirit. So, it's mentioned here, like the purification of gold. I've forgotten what the exact phrase was. Well, he referred to the gold of the spirit. So, in order to purify gold, you need to heat it, melt it down. And later on, he uses the example of a chrysalis, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly or a moth, as an example of how the soul is kind of melted down, if you like, and then reformed in a purer and more mature state. The example of the crucible is found in the Zohar, and it's something that Teresa uses as well. Chapter 4. The first stanza and its explanation. One dark night. Hang on, how long have I been talking? 18 minutes. 19 minutes. Let's see where I'm going to end. I might end there because I did a very long video yesterday, and this is a good place to end. And I'll start on the first stanza tomorrow. Maybe I'll even get to making my soap this evening. I've made a start. I'll get the rest of my things together anyway. So I need my protective clothing. I need to prepare some water. I need my hand blender, a jug, a little container to weigh out the lye, some litmus paper. That's about it, really. I can get that all together. Then all I have to do is heat up the oils and make the lye water and then blend it for about 40 minutes. And then that's it really. Put some water in to dilute it. Well, mix up the borax first. Put the borax in. And then boil the water to dilute it. Deionised water, because tap water makes it go cloudy. Oh, it was nice looking out and seeing the snow last night. Unfortunately, I didn't see it snowing. I just looked out and the snow was already there. It's been so cold all day, it's still there as well. So, it's going to be -6 tonight. I had to sleep in my dressing gown last night. Because my really thick duvet and having the heating on wasn't enough. Anyway. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.